In a lot of ways, the music from the Avatar series is, I don't know, just a little bit disappointing. The blue one, not the bendy one.
Leaves from the vine.
That music is fire. Although, it occurs to me that with the introduction of the Wind Traders in Fire and Ash, we're actually kind of just one movie away from them becoming one and the same. James Cameron's Avatar and its combined budget of over $1 billion is one of the most expensive projects in film history. Which is crazy to me because apparently the original score was supposed to be microtonal. And while yes, some surface level microtonality definitely made it into the film, the majority of it feels decorative. It's almost always just kind of tacked on to the end or the beginning of a track. It'll be like a vocal slide that ends a phrase, or random microtonal vocalizations that begin a track, but then immediately get drowned out by like this giant Western orchestral madness. It's not foundational or systemically implemented. In fact, it feels cheap. It feels like, hey, we need a vaguely ethnic moment here because our audience is too dumb to understand or get the very obvious parallel that we're drawing here. It didn't need to be like that though. In fact, it wasn't until they changed it. You see, a good portion of that $1 billion budget went into world building, specifically into research and development into the ethnomusicology of the Na'vi. Cameron initially asked the question, what would music on other planets sound like? How would the culture, religion, and worldview of Big Blue people affect the sounds they create? How would an alien with 4 fingers play the flute? These are wonderful questions and a fantastic way to start world building. So he brings on a bunch of ethnomusicologists to help him flesh out this world and really bring the music layer of this film to life in an authentic way. This is fantastic, honestly. I really do love this idea, but unfortunately, it was all totally scrapped in the end to be replaced with big Hollywood cinematic Dolby Atmos impact music. The YouTube channel Sideways has a really awesome video on why this makes the first Avatar soundtrack like the most ironic soundtrack in soundtrack history. I definitely recommend giving it a watch, but this comment basically just sums it up for me. So let me get this straight. James Cameron managed to culturally appropriate a culture they made for the film. Now, genuinely, I don't want to just jump on the hate bandwagon here, but rather explore what Avatar could have sounded like before the Hollywoodification of its score. I managed to dig up not only the original plans, but books, concept art, musicology reports, even academic studies. And yes, academic, fictional, ethnomusicology apparently is a thing. As well as interviews from experts who were hired to bring this story to life in an authentic way. Today, we're gonna find out what Avatar was supposed to sound like. Now, for all of us at home who don't have $1 billion budgets, managing our personal finance is essential to living a stress-free life. Have you ever free trialed something and then blanked on its existence only to notice a couple months later that you've been charged multiple times for a service you no longer use? I do this so much with so many different things. Well, today's sponsor, Rocket Money, is here to help. Rocket Money is an easy-to-use app that helps you save more and manage your money better. I use Rocket Money to cancel unwanted subscriptions with just a few taps, lower my bills. That's right, Rocket Money can help negotiate your bills down for you, from your internet service to your phone bill. And finally, just to set up a customized budget in seconds. The app shows you where your money is going at all times and identifies top spending categories with insights on how you can stay within your budget better. To save more and spend less, join the over 10 million users of Rocket Money today. Scan the QR code or click on the link in the description to get started for free. Thank you to Rocket Money for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to Pandora. In this companion book, Avatar, an Activist Survival Guide, we're told that the Na'vi people, quote, have no indigenous music theory. This, of course, isn't quite true. Music theory includes, but is not limited to, the language we use to communicate about music. In this case, pamptsil, the Na'vi word for music. Other Na'vi terms include a'u, drum, mokri, voice, and ien, a stringed instrument, as well as a whole host of others too. Heck, the Ometikaya roughly translates to the clan of the blue flute, which technically is not actually a flute, by the way. Apparently it's supposed to be like an in-lore mistranslation of an instrument that's closer to a trumpet. Not that that matters, I just found it interesting. So Clearly, there are some hints of music theory here and there, but what I think this is getting at is that the Na'vi don't have an obvious, systematized academic model of music theory that is equivalent to the many music theories found on Earth. This book really doubles down on this claim, saying that all theoretical information given here is the result of observation and analysis by ethnomusicologists. There has been no confirmation of music theories by the Na'vi themselves. So, what do the ethnomusicologists have to report about Na'vi music? There are some crazy things in here, like elliptical time signatures, impossible instruments based off of the alignment of the planets, and apparently 16-tone equal temperament, which we're definitely going to get to. But at the heart of it, Pandoran music is meant to be functional and deeply communal. It's 4-hour banquet songs in which Pandoran mythologies and histories are recited through story over microtonal drone music. It's weaving songs which are sung to the rhythm of the Na'vi who spin yarn on the mother loom, singing praise to Ewa and the infinite interconnectedness of Home Tree. It's also dance tunes which provide social function. Na'vi music is not spectacle, it's not exhibition, it's not performance. It's deeply communal, something to be shared with everyone. Social songs are usually in duple meter and often accompanied by drums. What drums, do you ask? Giant pendulum drums, apparently. They don't show up on screen or even in the soundtrack at all, but we do have concept art. These are the wokau, from wok, the Na'vi word for loud, and au, meaning drum. The idea is that a drummer, if you could call them that, honestly, they're more of a trapeze artist at this point, will swing on top of a giant log that's suspended hundreds of feet in the air to crash into the side of a giant tree that's been outfitted with skin drum heads. Now, if we consider the organology of this instrument, we might gather some valuable insights on how this drum might work in a musical setting. The thing is huge. I mean, the drummer's essentially standing on a drumstick many times larger than themselves, so clearly, you can't play this thing fast. I also suspect that it's difficult to be terribly accurate with it. So the drum likely functions as either an impact which accents important musical moments, or something like the gong agong in gamelan ensembles, a giant gong which helps demarcate musical phrase and structure. Simply put, boom, tree gong. We've started the music. Boom, tree gong. Now we're in our A section. Boom, tree gong. We're in our B section. I kind of like to think of it like it's punctuation, like we're putting a nice little period at the end. Well, honestly, it's more of like an exclamation mark at the end of a phrase. The wokau says something about the Na'vi. This is a patient instrument which gives itself to the whim of a pendulum, which is the whim of nature itself. It also might imply a unique sense of importance given to categories in form and folklore communicated by the Na'vi people. On a side note, I feel like this would be so much fun to build out in real life. Yes, the function of like how the instrument would actually work would be fascinating to get into, but just from like an acoustic perspective, like what happens if you turn an entire tree into a resonating column? That sounds pretty cool. So let's say if this video gets like, I don't know, maybe 500 comments, that's fair? Yeah, 500 comments, I will commit to attempt to build one. Anyway, other Na'vi instruments include various stringed instruments. In fact, in Fire and Ash specifically, composer Simon Franklin commissioned these instruments based off of a Turkish saz. They also had simple flutes, log drums, underwater gourd drums, and wooden pole drums, which come from the ikutse, meal mashing poles used to ground grains into flour. The poles are cut to various lengths, so they have different pitches. It's almost like if boomwhackers had kitchen utility. The result is another Na'vi work song where function and artistry meet in the melodies that occur by interlocking different rhythmic patterns between two or more mashers. According to Avatar.com, the Na'vi do not use set pitches, precise, standardized tuning, or tempered scales. To be perfectly honest, I have a lot of trouble buying this one because no society anywhere in history has ever not had some sort of standard of practice when it comes to their own indigenous indigenous music. If we're reading between the lines on this one, we could maybe possibly interpret this as ethnomusicologists from Earth, maybe not understanding or not fully comprehending the internal framework or practice standards of the Na'vi music. But still, perhaps there's just a wider deviation of acceptable intervals in Na'vi music. This is a thing that does happen even on Earth, so sure, why not? The approach this article from Pandorapedia suggests that the important thing to track is the melodic contour rather than precise notes which seem to fluctuate quite rapidly. Logically, this means that Na'vi notation will often look like squiggles which indicate the rough shape of the sung melody. This has an analog on Earth to birdsong notation as well as early neumes, the predecessor to standard notation we use today. We can then pair Na'vi script with this contour notation, and now we have a way to engage with the microtones.
Mi patireiti, mi paitanti, la unol ametelan.
The ethnomusicologist Dr. Wanda Bryant wrote this really awesome essay for Ethnomusicology Review, all about her experience working with James Cameron and James Horner on the first Avatar. The idea of microtonality gets brought up a lot. It really seemed that both Horner and Dr. Bryant really wanted to incorporate this at a foundational level and felt like it had a really strong ethnomusicological backing which fit the story. But the idea was canned when test audiences noted that the unusual sounds were, quote, wrong and out of tune. And when they moved away from vertical harmony towards horizontal harmony, in other words, resembling many of the vocal ornamentation styles of many Eastern and Indian cultures, Cameron's response was, quite frankly, disappointing. He said that the ornamentation took away from the pureness of the melody. So they re-recorded it in a simpler style with a Bulgarian singer. Cameron came back and said it sounded too Bulgarian, too ornamented, too microtonal. It's pretty funny because he specifically hired an ethnomusicologist for the express purpose of world building and bringing this culture's music to life in an authentic way. He directed them to cherry pick a bunch of different ethnic sounding cultures from around the world and put them into a blender to create a giant, beautiful avatar smoothie. And when they did exactly that, he literally said, "It sounds too weird." You see, he wanted vaguely ethnic, the kind of tiniest little taste of a foreign sound that so many Hollywood blockbusters excel at. Because God forbid we get to experience the full beauty and breadth of a culture without it being watered down in the name of it not being too weird. It's like one of those bubbly drinks where you get the hint of a flavor, but we all know it's mostly just water. Although, to be fair, on second thought, most drinks are mostly just water, but you know what I mean. To me, the visual analog of this is when they throw one of those yellow filters over the movies to signal to the audience that we're in Mexico. Your audience isn't dumb. You can take some more leeway and dig just a little bit deeper. But sure, I get it. When you're dealing with projects this massive, you're beholden to far more important things to your bottom line than your audience. Anyway, they went back and forth, simplifying the melody with each pass, systematically removing any parts of it that sounded too ethnic, until we ended up with one of the few pieces of music that actually made it into the film that was inspired by these early musicology sessions. And, I mean, it sounds fine, right? I actually think this is one of the more compelling musical moments in the first film, mostly because it doesn't have blasting synth bass over shouts and, deep trailer impact samples. Yes, by the way, most of the drums in this franchise are actually just samples. But the point is, I feel like the music could have been a lot more impactful had they just stuck to the plan. So, What was the plan? Well, first, the idea was that the Na'vi would primarily use a pentatonic scale of some kind. This was not necessarily meant to be a pentatonic scale based off of our Western 12-note system, but, perhaps a quasi-equal system, something like a Slendro scale or some sort of like altered 5-Edo. The Pandora wiki posits they alternatively could have had either hemitonic or anhemitonic pentatonicism. Basically, this scale, or this one. This idea is fascinating because it's informed by the physiology of the Na'vi themselves. They have 4 fingers, if you couldn't tell. And consequently, they use octal arithmetic, a base 8 system. The logic follows that they would construct their music and consequently their flutes to fit the hands of those who played them. This idea was scraped for sounding too recognizably Asian, and replaced with the microtonal drone music of the Na'vi banquet songs. These songs depict great stories of cultural significance. They're often up to 4 hours long. Women improvise overlapping diatonic melodies reminiscent of Swedish herding calls, while the men sing in fluctuating microtonal textures, which create a sort of living drone underneath. This living microtonal drone is meant to represent the spirit of Ewa and is also a really good reflection of Ometakayan cosmology. Much like Klingon music theory, the technical description of the microtones used here it's kind of ambiguous. So let's see if we can parse it out. Rather than holding a steady pitch, each man independently fluctuates his pitch microtonally, varying up to 1 3/5 pumptseoit on either side of the fundamental pitch. Okay, what's a pumptseoit? Well, pumptseo means music, and when we add the it suffix, we get small musical bits. We're never exactly told just how large these small bits are, but another passage implies that 16 of them equals a Pandoran octave. Now, unfortunately, to complicate things further, we're also told that the Pandoran octave is different. They don't have perfect octave equivalency like we do on Earth. Their scales aren't tempered like our scales, so the octaves have some stretch. This means that we don't actually have a known variable that we can use to mathematically derive the cent value, which defines a pumptseoit. But, I mean, we could probably get roughly there because, as far as I know, there's nothing significantly different about the Pandoran physiology when it comes to the ear, which would make their hearing marginally different than our hearing in terms of, like, octave perception. And you know what, actually just like roughly 1200 cents is probably totally fine, because remember, we're concerned less with exact pitches and more on like melodic contour. So let's just call this a rough 16-note tuning system. But there's actually more to it than that, because when we look at the fine print of this article again, it says that each man fluctuates his pitch up to 1 3/5 bits. The 1 is totally fine and falls neatly into our 16-note tuning system. But the 3/5, that kind of implies a further subdivision of microtones. So maybe they use something like a 16-note subset of 80 Edo, which occasionally from time to time expands into the larger divided pitch space. That actually gels pretty well conceptually with this idea of the living drone. Anyway, this is getting so far into the weeds and we need to ground ourselves with actual music. So call your favorite Swedish sheep herder and let's jam.
Weas we zau nungai ti vokok. Wea te kru te elani te vakuk.
It's kind of funny because when you actually sit down and mess with it away from like the theoretical understanding, when you actually sit down in the chair and articulate the music, you realize that the pumpseoit is actually quite small. It's significantly smaller than a 12th minor second. And obviously, it's quite dissonant. But if we go back one more time and interpret this text as 1 3/5 pumpseoit being the edge boundary of Na'vi drone practice, you realize that with higher order tunings, you can get super granular with it, and the drones might be better interpreted similar to the heterophonic vocal practice of many different non-Western Earth cultures. The Na'vi are all about balance and spirituality and nature. Their spirits, for lack of a better word, are tangible. Ewa is a physical, distributed, interconnected consciousness. What happens to a culture whose gods physically live among them? Well, they probably take them a whole lot more seriously. The reason their scale is broken up into 16 bits is that they're supposed to represent the 16 moons and planets in the Pandoran solar system. Harmony of the Spheres, anyone? The planets also show up in the original concept art in these circular drums, which didn't show up in the film, but, oddly enough, did show up in Cirque du Soleil. Not gonna lie, that is kind of like undeniably badass. Probably one of the craziest things to come from these early brainstorming sessions from the movies is this idea that the Na'vi have elliptical time signatures derived from the orbital patterns of their solar system. What the heck is an elliptical time signature? No one actually bothered to find out, which, that's fair. It's a little bit out there. Now, let me try and insert a little bit of nuance here, because I'm not trying to say that all of these ideas are great or that they would have worked in context. No. And for what it is, the score's pretty good. I mean, it's mixed well, it's recorded well, it sounds like a big budget Hollywood film. I guess maybe I just don't love what it is. Like, I know I've been poking fun at the cinematic impact sound throughout this video, but honestly, that's not really my issue, because in the right context, that sound can be great. Heck, I love doing this kind of sound design, truly. But there was just so much squandered opportunity to do so much more. Let me give you a quick example. Hunting songs in the lore are amongst the oldest tunes that the Ometikaya know. They are ancient and have been passed down, and because of that, they feature a lot of musical emphasis on the glottal stop features prominent in the Proto-Na'vi language. This is so cool, a synergy between how language evolves and how it affects core aspects of the music itself. The language grew and evolved, but we have a holdover of sorts, of a time past for these people in the songs they carried forward from their ancestry. That is musical world building done right. You can see history and depth and believable culture here. But, and this will be a familiar story, when it came time to record those few songs that were actually in Na'vi for the screen, a significant portion of nonsense words were selected instead. That sucks, and it doesn't serve the project. You know, the music from Avatar and Way of Water and Fire and Ash is probably totally fine in a vacuum. Like, you don't need to do this complex musical world building to adequately support your film. But it's that they took the time to do so. They took so much time, decades, years of pre-production to iron this out, to create a functioning language, a fully functioning language, and build something that only a few other fantasy series in history have accomplished. And to just throw it out at the end because ratings, because test audiences, because producers and corporate execs, and because you're just afraid of sounding just a little bit too weird. It's just all a little bit disappointing. Huge shout out to all of our patrons now on screen for making this video and all future videos possible. If you want to support this channel's mission of getting as much educational microtonal content out there as humanly possible, then Patreon is by far the best way to do it. We've got a bunch of in-depth lectures, including an entire crash course on microtonal harmony for the modern musician, a bunch of really cool bonus theory videos, as well as some practical ones, like how to microtune in your DAW and various ways of actually producing microtonal music with modern instruments. I also have production and bass lessons where I show you how I make my music from start to finish, as well as a bunch of virtual instruments and sample packs as well. Come study with me. I really do make it a point to make myself available to all of our patrons to answer questions, geek out about music theory, and help develop and foster a thriving community of microtonal music theory nerds. Jordy and I await you with open arms and, of course, a whole lot of notes.